The night everyone threw money at her. One man quietly decided he'd spend the rest of his life protecting her. Nobody knew why the most feared Mafia boss in the city froze the moment she stepped onto that stage. To everyone else, she was just another stripper trying to survive. But when she looked up for a single second, something inside him shattered. Because he wasn't looking at a dancer. He was looking at the only woman he could never allow himself to love. And the only one who could destroy everything he had built. Some people believe love arrives with flowers. Others think it comes with a smile. But sometimes, love walks into the darkest room in the city wearing borrowed heels, hiding bruises beneath glitter, pretending not to be afraid. The night everyone threw money at her. One man silently decided he'd spend the rest of his life protecting her. No one noticed him. That was the strange part. Because every person inside that exclusive club knew exactly who sat in the private balcony overlooking the stage. They feared him too much to even glance in his direction. His name was Dante Moretti, a man whispered about in expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, and police stations. A billionaire, a criminal, a king without a crown. People disappeared because of him. Deals lived or died because of one phone call. Women chased him. Enemies feared him. Yet on that particular night, none of those things mattered. Because the moment the spotlight landed on the newest dancer, Dante stopped breathing. Her name wasn't really Isabella. At least, that's what the club owner told the customers. It was simply the stage name printed on the menu. The real woman beneath the makeup had spent the last 3 years running from a past no one knew. She smiled because she had to. She danced because rent had to be paid. She ignored wandering hands because survival demanded it. Every dollar thrown at the stage meant another day. She wouldn't have to sleep in her car. Nobody ever asked how she ended up there. Nobody cared, except one man, and that made him dangerous. While everyone admired her body, Dante couldn't stop watching her eyes. They weren't empty. They weren't seductive. They were exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that only came from carrying pain too heavy for one heart. He noticed the tiny tremble in her hands whenever the music changed. He noticed how she secretly checked the entrance every few minutes, as if she expected someone terrifying to walk through those doors. She wasn't performing. She was hiding. And Dante had spent his entire life recognizing fear. What nobody inside that club knew was that someone had already placed a price on the mysterious dancer's head. Someone wanted her found. Someone powerful. Someone willing to kill anyone who helped her. Dante hadn't spoken a single word to her. He didn't know her real name. He didn't know where she came from. He didn't know why she looked like she hadn't slept peacefully in years. Yet before the first song ended, he quietly gave one order. Nobody touches her. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't desire. Not yet. It felt strangely familiar, as though fate had spent years leading both of them to that exact moment. But fate has cruel timing, because the closer Dante came to discovering who she really was, the more impossible loving her would become. And before sunrise, one secret would force him to choose between his empire or the only woman who had ever made him wish he were simply an ordinary man. Dante Moretti had spent years convincing the world that nothing could touch him. Not betrayal, not grief, not guilt. Every emotion had been buried beneath discipline, silence, and impossible choices. Yet the woman dancing beneath the club lights had somehow reached a place inside him that no enemy ever could. He didn't leave when her performance ended. He simply watched as she disappeared through a narrow hallway behind the stage. A few minutes later, his head of security approached. The man with the photograph is still here. Dante didn't even look away. Find out who sent him. And the girl? Dante paused. Keep her safe. She must never know we're watching. That same night, Emma wiped away her makeup in a cracked dressing room mirror. Without the bright lights and glitter, she looked years younger. She stared at the small envelope hidden inside her bag. It held every dollar she had earned that week. After paying rent, she would barely have enough left for groceries. Still, she smiled. She had survived another week. For someone else, that wouldn't have meant much. For Emma, surviving had become its own kind of victory. Outside the club, rain soaked the empty streets. She wrapped her thin jacket tighter around herself and started walking toward the bus stop. She never noticed the black sedan following from a distance. Inside it sat Dante. He wasn't following her because he distrusted her. He was following because the report his men had just delivered changed everything. The photograph wasn't random. Someone had offered half a $1 million for information leading to a woman named Emma Carter. The picture was 5 years old. The face was unmistakably hers. Dante frowned. If someone is willing to pay that much, he murmured. She's running from something far bigger than debt. His driver glanced into the mirror. Should we intervene? Not unless we have to. Emma finally reached her apartment building. Calling it an apartment was generous. The walls were cracked. The heating barely worked. Water stains covered the ceiling. Still, it was the first place that had ever truly belonged to her. She unlocked the door and froze. Someone had been inside. Nothing had been stolen. Instead, one object rested on the kitchen table. A white rose. Beneath it lay a single handwritten note. I found you. Emma's hands began to shake. She didn't pack. She didn't call the police. She simply grabbed the worn backpack she always kept ready and ran. Across the street, Dante watched her burst from the building in panic. He had seen fear before. This wasn't ordinary fear. This was the terror of someone whose nightmare had finally caught up with her. For the first time that night, he stepped out of the car, not as the feared head of an empire, but as a man who refused to let another innocent person lose everything. Emma had no idea that the stranger walking toward her would change her life forever, nor did she know that his greatest battle would not be against his enemies. It would be against the walls around his own heart. Emma didn't stop running until her lungs burned. Rain blurred the empty streets, but the fear in her chest was sharper than ever. For 5 years, she had believed she was finally invisible. Now someone had left a single white rose on her table, not to frighten her, to remind her that no matter how far she ran, her past still knew where to find her. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a tall man standing beneath a street lamp. Dante. He wasn't wearing the tailored jacket everyone at the club recognized. Tonight, he looked almost ordinary. Almost. You shouldn't be out here alone, he said calmly. Emma's first instinct was to walk away. She had learned long ago that handsome men with expensive watches usually came with expensive lies. I'm fine. No, Dante replied. You're terrified. She hated that he was right. What do you want? He looked at her for a long moment before answering. The apartment building lost electricity after a violent storm. Emma found candles in the kitchen while Dante struggled to make tea on a small gas stove. Neither of them was particularly good at it. When the kettle whistled too loudly, they both laughed. Real laughter. The kind that arrives without permission. Emma looked at him across the candlelight. You know? What? I spent years believing kind men only existed in books. Dante lowered his eyes. If only she knew. The peace didn't last. One evening, Emma arrived unexpectedly at Dante's office. The receptionist assumed she was expected and directed her upstairs. She opened the door just as a meeting ended. Several sharply dressed men immediately stood. No one spoke. Instead, every single person lowered their head toward Dante. Boss. The room fell silent. Emma stared in confusion. Then she noticed the security monitors, the armed guards, the maps, the coded files, and finally, a newspaper lying open on the desk. Across the front page was a photograph. The headline read, "The Invisible King of the City." The man in the photograph was Dante, the same man who had patiently made her breakfast, the same man who remembered how she liked her coffee, the same man she had slowly fallen in love with. Her voice barely emerged. You? Dante took one step forward. Emma. No. She backed away. You told me you worked in business. I do. You let me believe you were ordinary. I wanted you to know the man I am with you. She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. I don't even know who you are. You know the part of me that matters. Then why hide the rest? Because I was afraid you'd leave. The words never reached his lips. Emma turned and walked away. Dante didn't follow. For the first time in years, the most powerful man in the city understood what true helplessness felt like. Power could buy buildings. It could silence enemies. It could command loyalty, but it could never force the woman he loved to trust him again. As Emma disappeared into the crowd, she believed the greatest lie in her life had finally been exposed. She had no idea an even darker truth was waiting for her. The white rose had never come from her former fiancé. It had been delivered by someone much closer to Dante than either of them could have imagined. And that person wasn't trying to reclaim Emma. They were trying to break the only heart Dante Moretti had ever allowed himself to have. Emma left without looking back. For days, she replayed every memory in her mind. The breakfasts, the quiet walks, the nights they spent talking until sunrise. The way Dante always stepped onto the street first when they crossed the road. The way he noticed when she was pretending to be okay. Had any of it been real? Or had it all been another carefully crafted illusion? She wanted to believe she had been deceived. It would have made leaving easier. But her heart refused to cooperate. Because every act of kindness had been genuine. Every smile had been real. The lie wasn't that Dante cared. The lie was that he believed she would never accept the truth about his past. Meanwhile, Dante sat alone in his office. The room that once felt powerful now felt unbearably empty. His closest advisor placed a folder on the desk. "We found the person who sent the white roses." Dante opened it. Inside were photographs, bank transfers, and messages. The campaign of fear had never been about Emma alone. Someone had learned she was the only person capable of reaching Dante's guarded heart. Hurting her was the fastest way to destroy him. For years, Dante had built walls around himself. The moment he let someone in, those walls became a weapon against both of them. He closed the folder. "I'm done." His advisor frowned. "Done with what?" "All of it. You've spent 20 years building this." "I know. And you're walking away?" Dante looked toward the city skyline. "I've spent half my life building an empire." He paused. "It never once made me happy." Over the next several weeks, he began transferring control of his companies to trusted executives, selling businesses that had become symbols of the life he no longer wanted, and stepping away from the influence that had defined him for years. People whispered that he had disappeared. Some thought he had lost everything. Only Dante knew the truth. For the first time in decades, he was finally choosing his own future. Not one built on fear, one built on hope. Emma, meanwhile, had started over once again. She rented a tiny studio apartment above a neighborhood bookstore. During the day, she worked at a local art gallery. At night, she painted. Her canvases slowly filled with sunlight, oceans, and open windows. No more dark rooms. No more locked doors. No more glitter hiding bruises. One rainy afternoon, the gallery owner approached her. "Someone bought every painting." Emma blinked. "Every one." The owner smiled. "He only left this." It wasn't flowers. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't money. It was a folded note. Inside, only one sentence appeared. "You once told me the world already has enough angry people. I'm finally learning how to smile." No signature. None was needed. Emma smiled through tears. Months later, she found herself standing on a quiet beach just before sunrise. She hadn't planned to go there. Something simply told her she should. Far ahead, a familiar figure stood watching the waves. Dante turned as he heard footsteps. Neither of them spoke immediately. Some silences deserved to exist. Finally, Emma asked the only question that mattered. "Why didn't you come after me?" He looked down at the sand. "Because love isn't choosing someone for them." He met her eyes. "It's giving them the freedom to choose. And if I hadn't come, I would have spent the rest of my life grateful that, for a little while, I knew what it felt like to love someone." Emma stepped closer. "I was angry. I know. I was afraid. I know. I still don't understand everything." "You don't have to." She reached for his hand. "I only need to understand one thing." "And what's that?" "The man who protected me when he didn't have to." A quiet smile crossed Dante's face. "The rest of my story doesn't matter if you believe that part." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "I do." As the sun rose over the water, the future no longer felt frightening. It felt possible, not because either of them had perfect lives, but because they had stopped running from the past, from the truth, and from each other. Years later, visitors to that same seaside town often noticed a small art cafe overlooking the ocean. Inside, paintings covered the walls. A man with silver beginning to show at his temples brewed coffee every morning. A woman laughed as she arranged fresh flowers on each table. To strangers, they looked like an ordinary couple. No one knew the roads they had traveled. No one knew how close they had come to losing one another. And perhaps that was the greatest ending either of them could have wished for. The world had first seen a woman struggling to survive. One man had seen the love of his life. In the end, she saw something even more important. Not a powerful man. Not a man defined by his past. Just the man who chose love when it mattered most. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't holding on to power. It's finding the courage to let it go for the person who teaches you how to truly live. The end.